The problem is this. Anytime a person decides that he's going to be good, he becomes bad. It's unavoidable. As soon as you decide that you're going to be observant, you're going to lose all your friends. It's true. Right. I'll tell you why. Traditionally, when a person was tempted to sin, but was determined not to, it created an internal dialogue that didn't sound very intelligent. Because what happens is this. You're tempted to do something you're not supposed to do. Whether it's a relationship or it's a sandwich. Pretty much the same thing. You're tempted to eat the sandwich because you're in an airport, you're hungry, the flight is delayed. I'm not talking from personal experience. And you walk past this whatever, and it smells really good. So you want to have something to eat. It's not kosher. So the internal dialogue that happens goes something like this. Your evil inclination, your Yetzer Hara says, let's have that sandwich. Let's have that sandwich. You say no. Your evil inclination says, why not? You say, I don't want to. The evil inclination says, yes, you do. You say, no, I don't want to. The evil inclination says, oh yeah, you do. You say, no, I don't. Whoever outlasts the other wins. It's not an intelligent conversation. You want to. Oh no. Yeah, you do. No, I don't. This is embarrassing. Basically, the traditional response has been, I can't eat that, it's disgusting. Right? We don't eat pork because, have you ever seen a pig? Disgusting. We don't sin because it's disgusting. Every sin is disgusting. You put a little milk into your coffee after a meat meal? Oh, that's disgusting. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. This is really embarrassing. Besides, if every time you avoid a sin, it's because it's disgusting, or the consequences are going to be disgusting, you eventually develop this attitude towards life. Yeah, it's disgusting. Yeah, look at those people, they're disgusting. Everything's disgusting. The whole world is disgusting, except me. You don't have any friends, because nobody wants to be like that. The whole world is disgusting, everything is bad, everything is evil. Nobody wants to be like that. So why did so many people who were raised with Yiddishkeit back in the shtetl, why did they leave it? Why did they dump it when they crossed the ocean? Or as soon as they could? Not because they don't want to keep Shabbos or they don't want to keep kosher. They didn't want to be that kind of person. They didn't want to be sour about life. Behind every rock hides a sin. And you have to be eternally vigilant because it's going to get you. Nobody wants to be like that. There's an alternative to that, which is a little better. And that is, I don't sin because I'm better than that. Oh, some people will do it, that's okay, but I'm better than that. I expect more of myself. That's a little nicer, but if that's what you tell yourself every time you're tempted to sin or every time you do a mitzvah, you're going to start believing it. You're going to start believing that you're special. You're not going to have any friends. Not that you had any before, but... Which is the second reason that people reject mitzvahs. Because they associate it with the personality of those who keep the mitzvahs. Holier than thou, they look down at the rest of the world, they think they're special. I don't want to be like that. I met a guy, very simple guy. He was a gardener, actually. Very simple, kind of earthy guy, you know. And he said, my father passed away when I was a teenager, and he told me, stay away from religious people. And that's why I've never been in a synagogue. But you know, I think maybe my father was wrong. Because I've been to the synagogue and it's not that bad. So I said, you listen to your father. And stay away from religious people. He says, so what's with the synagogue and everything? I said, that's because a Jew is supposed to put on tefillin, so people come here to put on the tefillin. He says, what's that? I tell him a little bit. He says, really, where can I get one? I said, talk to the rabbi here, he'll get you a pair of tefillin. He says, great. What else? I said, well, you have to have a mezuzah on your door. He said, where do I get one? I said, talk to the rabbi and get you a mezuzah. We went through a list of things, about 6 or 7 things that he could do that's Jewish. And he puts it all down, he writes it all down for himself, and then he says, you know, maybe my father was right. Doing these things much better than religion. He got it right. He got it right. You can do mitzvahs without being sour at the whole world and without thinking you're special. How do you do that? How do you do that? What is the internal dialogue supposed to sound like so that you're not making a fool of yourself? Like, oh no. Let's take a look at the Tanya. Let's read the Hebrew and translate, or just read the English. Follow along. The main piece is right in the middle, so we want to get to it. Tanya Perek Yudalid, chapter 14. The Rebbe had described earlier a radical idea that there are those people who are tzaddikim, perfectly saintly, holy people, and that is a gift from heaven bestowed on certain individuals, and it is not the objective and the goal of the average person to become a tzaddik. It's not realistic, it's not necessary, and it's not even desirable. A tzaddik has no evil inclination. He's a different species. The average person has a good inclination and an evil inclination, and he has to deal with it. Those are the soldiers on the front lines. You have to confront the enemy and you have to win the battle. So you do have an evil inclination, you come in contact with evil, and you have to do something to fix it. So here the Rebbe describes a little bit a person who does what he needs to do, but he's not a tzaddik. The service of a Benoni, the way the Benoni serves God, that's the way the average person should be. Benoni means in between. He doesn't sin, but he's not a saint. Now, what does it mean not to sin and not be a saint? It doesn't mean do a little sin once in a while, just to prove that you're not a saint. So there should be no mistake. No, it doesn't mean that. A person need never sin, even if he's not a saint. So the sinner is somebody who sins. A saint is someone who can't sin. The Benoni, the in-between, is someone who could but does not. And that's the goal for the average person. To become a Benoni is the ambition or the desire of every person. Why so? Because every person can be a Benoni at any point, at any time in his life. Which means, even if he hasn't been a Benoni, he can become a Benoni at any time. In other words, once you decide you're not going to sin, you can become a Benoni. It doesn't mean that you've never sinned in your life. Now, why is it that a person can become a Benoni, but he can't become a tzaddik? The tzaddik despises evil. It brings him no pleasure, and so he's incapable of doing it. To him, a non-kosher food is like chalk. There's no desire, there's no appetite, there's no pleasure. So he can't sin. Whereas the Benoni does not despise evil. He finds pleasure in it, but he won't do it. Now, not finding pleasure in evil, that is a matter given to the heart. And for the Benoni, all times are not the same. Sometimes he's inspired, and then he really doesn't want to sin. Sometimes he's not inspired and would want to sin, but he doesn't. So what is the virtue of a Benoni? He is perfect in behavior, not in appetite. When it comes to not sinning or doing the mitzvah at its right time, the Benoni is perfect. So there's a difference between internal personality makeup and behavior. A person can be perfect in their behavior even though internally all things are not perfect. Like a person can have a temper and never lose their temper. How is that possible? Because when it comes to behavior, he's very disciplined. Can he change his personality and lose his temper? No. That's his personality. So the Benoni has mastered his behavior, which is thinking, speaking, doing. But his appetites, he can't change his appetites. So he can't change the inner workings, but he can always do the right thing. And that is the virtue of behavior. The virtue of behavior is you can always be better than you are. That makes sense? That also allows you to be false, hypocritical, untrue. You can act like you're nice and you're really not nice. But if a not nice person acts nice, that's nice. I mean, that's even better than a nice person acting nice. If you're sincere. Because if you're acting nice because you want to mislead people, then it's nasty. But if you're acting nice because it's the right thing to do, even though you're not the nicest, that's wonderful. So the opportunity to be nicer than you are is a wonderful gift. That means your behavior can be better than you. That's great. That's like you can quote a very wise statement and you're not even wise at all. But that's great. You read the right books. You know what to quote. You got good taste. You're quoting the right people. So, the Benoni is perfect when it comes to behavior, even though internally he's got a struggle going on. He's not always nice. He's not always kind. He's not always kosher. He's not always holy. Dahainu, what does it mean that he can control his behavior? When it comes to actual deed, which means actions, speech, and even thought, when it comes to behavior, a person has the freedom, the option, and the ability to do or think or say that which goes diametrically against his feelings or his mood. So that even when a person is in a really rotten mood, he can think the right thing, say the right thing, and do the right thing. And that's not repressed. Not to worry about that. Not to worry that if you don't follow your impulses, you're going to end up in therapy. That's not the case. Now, I'll tell you why exactly. There's a huge difference between an emotional conflict versus a conflict between mind and heart. When you have an emotional conflict, it means I really very much want to go on this cruise, but I am terrified of boats. This is a problem because they're both emotions. There's the pleasure and the desire, and there's the fear. They're both emotions. So your heart is in conflict with itself. That you need to get rid of. That's not a good tension to carry around. If you can't do it by yourself, go for therapy. But resolve that conflict because it's not going to do you any good. But what if the conflict is between your mind and your heart? Your heart says, I want to go on the cruise. Your mind says, you don't have time for this. You've got other responsibilities. This is not a conflict of emotion against emotion. This is not your heart torn in two directions. It's your mind saying one thing, your heart saying something else. Is that a problem? No, that's a human being. That's a human being. So if your mind says, I know you'd like to go, but this is not the right time, we got too many responsibilities, and you decide not to go, are you now a repressed person? You need therapy because you didn't go on the cruise? No. You made a rational decision, and your heart will gladly go along with it as long as you're taking responsibility. So the mind and the heart are like the parent and the child. The child will kick and scream, but if the parent makes the decision, the child is happy. Because now he doesn't have the responsibility. So the heart doesn't really want responsibility. So when the heart says, can't we go? I want to go. I'd love to go. That doesn't mean you go. That means you now have to decide whether you should go. If your heart doesn't say, let's go, then you don't have to make a decision. There's nothing to decide. And there's a brilliant little expression that goes with this. I think it's from AA. To be a healthy person, don't believe everything you feel. Isn't that brilliant? Don't believe everything you feel. So it felt like, you felt like it. Fine. Now make a decision. Should you do it or not? A feeling is not a decision. It's an option. The Benoni decides that he's not going to do what he feels like doing. Is that repression? Is that going to destroy his self-image? Not at all. Not at all. This is the nature of a human being. The mind decides when there are options. The heart is an option. So the Benoni always does the right thing, regardless of what the heart is demanding. So that even while the heart is impassioned about a sandwich, the Benoni can say, no, not going to eat it. Let's see how that works. Even while the heart is desiring some pleasure, whether it's a permissible pleasure or a forbidden pleasure, God forbid, he is able to dismiss that passion and remove it from his thoughts completely. The question is, how? Like we were saying before, If a Benoni says, no, I'm not going to eat that, is he becoming holier than thou? Is he turning sour on the world? Is he simply saying, I don't wanna? What's going on internally? Here is this brilliant insight into human behavior. The Benoni does this by declaring to himself, no, I will not eat the non-kosher sandwich because I will not be wicked. Period. Put a period in there. I will not be wicked. I don't want to be sinful. That's the first response. It's a sin. I don't want to sin. The Yetzer Hara says, I'm not suggesting you become sinful. Of course you shouldn't be sinful. You're going to keep kosher. It's just this one sandwich. Next time you'll be more careful. You'll pack a sandwich. But right now you're stuck here. You're starving. This smells good. Let's have a sandwich. Don't want to be a sinner. Don't get so dramatic. It's just a sandwich. To this, continue reading, even for a moment. To that argument, you say to your Yetzer Hara, no, not even for a moment. Now, what does your Yetzer Hara say to that? Yetzer Hara says, what are you talking about? What are you saying? You don't want to sin even for a moment? Yes, you do. You're hungry. It smells good. You want to eat the sandwich. What are we talking about here? Why are we having this conversation? Because you don't want? You do want. So eat it. To this you say, you're right. See, religious people are afraid to say that. Religious people are afraid to ever admit that their evil inclination is right. Because you admit that, you've lost the battle. The Rebbe says, don't be a fool. When the Yetzer Hara is right, he's right. Admit it. So you say to the Yetzer Hara, yeah, you're right. I very much want to eat that sandwich. However, I will not be parted and separated, heaven forbid, from the one God under any circumstances. Being mindful of the admonition, your iniquities interpose between you and God. I don't know what interpose means, but when you do a sin, it separates you from God. It estranges you from God. So, you're right, I do want to eat it, but I don't want the consequence. If I eat it, I'm not on the same page with God. I don't want that separation. I don't want to be distant from God. Pretty impressive, huh? Your Yetzer Hara is just as smart as you. So the Yetzer Hara says to that, you're so shallow. Such a shallow person. You don't want to eat the sandwich because it's going to come between you and God. Why are you so superficial? The fact that you desire the sandwich, your mouth is watering in case you haven't noticed, that separates you from God. Whether you eat it or not is insignificant. You're separated from God. God says that food is an abomination. You say it smells pretty good to me. How further apart can you get? You're on opposite ends of the spectrum. What is despicable to him is delicious to you. So how far are you from God? Come on. You think eating the sandwich is going to make a big difference? You're so shallow. Pretty good, huh? You got to have a little respect for this Yetzer Hara. comes up with good ones. So what do you say to that? And again, traditionally you would say, oh no. Oh no. You got to say to your Yetzer Hara, you're right. I am very far from God. If my mouth can be watering over something that God despises, we don't think alike. Our tastes are very different. However, my real desire is to unite my nefesh, ruach, and neshama with Him through investing them in His blessed three garments, namely action, speech, and thought dedicated to Torah, to God, His Torah, and His commandments. You say to your Yetzer Hara, you're right. I'm very far from God. I am not holy, I'm not spiritual, I'm not God-like. That's true. But I'm not going to eat the sandwich. Why? Because I don't like this distance. I don't want to be as far from God as I am. I want to get closer to God. So you say to your Yetzer Hara, you're right. What's right is right. What's true is true. I am far from God. I am not at all holy. But I want to be closer to God. I want to get closer to God. How do you get closer to God? By thinking your own thoughts, saying your own words, doing your own thing? Of course not. You get closer to God when you think His thoughts, speak His words, and do His things. Then you get closer to God. To this, the animal soul, the Yetzer Hara, says, who do you think you're talking to? You hypocrite. You have the chutzpah to look me in the eye and tell me that you want to get closer to God. I know what you want to get closer to. I've never seen your mouth water over davening. How can you be such a hypocrite? Well, chutzpah, bald-faced lie. Your mouth is watering over treif. And you have the chutzpah to say, oh, I want to be close to God. You want to be close to that sandwich. When you finish with this, you're not going to need therapy. You're going to have worked out all your repressed feelings just from this alone. So let's follow. The next thing, you've got to put a period after that. Instead of the comma, after His Torah and His commandments, period. That's where the Yetzer Hara says, don't be a hypocrite. And that's where most Jews throw in the towel. That's it. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I can't do this. And they stop keeping kosher. But the right answer to that is, when you're right, you're right. So you make your Yetzer Hara feel good. When you're right, you're right. I really want to get closer to the sandwich. But why will I not eat the sandwich? Because I want to get closer to God by virtue of the love of God that is hidden in my heart, as in the heart of all Jews who are called the lovers of God's name. Even the most unworthy among the worthless is capable of sacrificing himself for the sanctity of God. And surely I'm not inferior to him, so don't try that argument on me. Here's what you're saying to your Yetzer Hara. It's true I want to get closer to the sandwich. That's me. But the Jew in me loves God and wants to get closer to God. And that's not that I'm special. Every Jew is like that. It's the nature of every Jew. Even the lowest of the low will not convert or bow to an idol even if it cost him his life. And don't tell me I'm worse than the lowest of the low. That's arrogant. I'm an ordinary guy with ordinary problems, okay? So, the average Jew, no, the worst of the worst, wants to get closer to, wants to stay connected to God. That's the Jew in me. So you're right. My person, my human self, the Jew in me prefers God. So I can't eat it because it's not a Jewish thing. And don't tell me that I am less Jewish than the lowest of the low. I'm not. Now the Yetzer Hara comes up with the best argument of them all. Now the Yetzer Hara says to you, and that goes back to your question. The Yetzer Hara says to you, you see, when we talk, we eventually arrive at a meeting of the mind. This is what I've been trying to tell you all along. The lowest of the low is still Jewish. He'd never convert. He would never bow to an idol. So why can't you be like him? What is the lowest of the low? He doesn't keep Shabbos, he doesn't keep kosher, he doesn't give tzedakah, he doesn't go to the mikveh, he works on Shabbos, he eats on Yom Kippur. He's the lowest of the low. He's still Jewish. What's your problem? And he's as Jewish as you. See? Eat the sandwich. And if they ever ask you to convert, don't do it. Come on, you're Jewish. That's where the rest of the Jews give up. Yeah, that's right. So then you have to say to your Yetzer Hara, it is only that a spirit of folly has overcome the lowest of the low, and he imagines that committing a sin will not affect his Jewishness, and his soul will not be severed thereby from God of Israel, forgetting also his love for God, which is hidden in his heart. So what enables the lowest of the low, on the one hand, to be the lowest of the low, and then give up his life rather than his Jewishness? What schizophrenia is this? The answer is, the lowest of the low allows himself to sin because he is deluded. He thinks that sinning doesn't separate you from God. Of course, it doesn't make you non-Jewish, but it certainly separates you from God. I actually heard this one guy say, he was doing marriage counseling, and I said something about, be nice to your wife. He says, you don't understand, I don't have to be nice to her. She's very devoted, she'll never leave me. You see the logic there? If she wasn't devoted, if she's threatening to leave me, then I got to be nice to her. No, she's a good wife. So why do I have to be nice to her? I mean, you see that? It's like, God will never abandon you, so why be nice to him? That's what's wrong with the lowest of the low. Also, he is deceived, he is misguided about himself. It's self-delusion. He is the guy who will die rather than bow to an idol. So what's he doing eating non-kosher? I mean, who are you really? Therefore, the lowest of the low, working under this misconception, this delusion, does what he does. Let's continue on. But as for me, I have no desire to be a fool and to deny the truth. Okay. Now we've gotten somewhere. Because to this, the Yetzer Hara has no argument. What is now the bottom line? You say no to a non-kosher sandwich or to any sin. Why not? Because you're special? Because the sin is disgusting? No. You say no to a sin because for a Jew to do something un-Jewish is not true. It's not true. The Yetzer Hara is saying, this is for you. Obviously, you're hungry, this is good food, so it's for you. The answer to that is, you're lying. It's not for me. Being hungry doesn't make it appropriate, any more than a threat to die makes bowing to an idol appropriate. So, if I know who I am, then I know what is true and what is not true. It's not true that non-kosher food is appropriate for a Jew. It's not true. Just like bowing to an idol is not for a Jew. So why does the lowest of the low refuse to bow? Because all of a sudden he became Orthodox? No. Orthodox people bow too. The reason he refuses to bow to the idol is because somebody just reminded him that he's Jewish. What reminded him that he's Jewish? Somebody said, I want you to stop being Jewish. All of a sudden he's thinking, wait a minute, I am Jewish. Oh, in that case I can't bow. Let me tell you this story. Back in Russia in the bad old days, Hasidim suffered terribly. There's hardly a family of Hasidim in Russia who didn't have a member of the family who fell victim to the communists. Almost every family was devastated. The father, the son, the mother ended up in Siberia, in a labor camp, in a prison, in a dungeon. One such family were hiding in a non-Jewish village because they knew the communists were after the husband, but it didn't work. They found the husband and shipped him away to Siberia. This left the mother with an 8-year-old boy and no food and no money and no hope. To feed the child and herself, she had to go into the big city. But she couldn't take her son with her because officially that boy didn't exist. Otherwise he would have to go to school, communist school. So he officially doesn't exist, so she couldn't travel with him. So she left him with a neighbor, a non-Jewish Russian couple. She was going to be gone for 4 days, and she would come back with some food, with some money, whatever. She told the boy what he may eat in the neighbor's house and what he may not eat, and that she would be back in 4 days. She wasn't back in 4 days. Trains weren't running, the schedule was all messed up. She was not back in 4 days. The man, the neighbor, would come home drunk every night and would make a sport of trying to force the boy to eat some non-kosher meat. Whatever they ate there, horse meat or... He would try forcing it into his mouth, and the kid would bite and scream and kick and cry. So after a week, the mother didn't come back. The woman, the neighbor, didn't like all this fighting and screaming every night, so she put the boy into an orphanage. At the orphanage, nobody bothered him, nobody molested him, but there were always questions from the people there, from the other orphans. Why can't you eat this? Why can't you eat that? What's wrong? Anyway, 2 weeks go by. Mother hasn't returned. The orphanage takes the kids on a hike. And it's a hot summer day, and the children are thirsty. So they take the group into a farm, and they ask the farmer if he has a drink for the kids. So he brings out a pitcher of cold milk, gives each kid a glass, and fills the glass with milk. And as this little boy is about to drink the milk, he hears the farmer saying to the counselor, to the adult, "It's really lucky that you stopped in today, because for the children, there is nothing healthier than horse's milk." The little boy hears this, and he's got a conflict with himself. He's thirsty, like the rest of them. It's a cold drink, but it's not kosher. If he refuses the drink, it'll start a whole new conversation. Well, milk is not kosher? Now what's your problem? He didn't want that hassle. He was 8 years old. He finally decided not to drink it. And in order to avoid a scene, he made believe that the glass slipped out of his hand and it spilled, and too bad. Now the orphans are coming home to the orphanage, and his mother had returned. It's a true story. The mother runs to the neighbor, and her son is not there. And in those days, children were kidnapped and disappeared regularly. There was a market. So she was very frightened. She runs to the orphanage, and she says, "I'm here to pick up my son." And they said, "He's not here right now." She thought, "Oh my God, this is..." And she panicked. So she's pacing in front of the orphanage, doesn't know what to do. There's no authority, there's no police, there's nobody to turn to if, God forbid, her son had disappeared. And as she's pacing, she sees this group coming back, and her son is there. And the little boy sees his mother. So he runs towards his mother, and he shouts from a distance in Yiddish, "Mame, I'm still yours. I didn't drink it." So it turns out that what held him, what kept him from drinking it, is not because he was a tzaddik, not because he was holy, not because he was so disciplined. It's because he didn't want to create a distance between himself and his mother. She wouldn't drink this. If he does drink this, so would his mother disown him? No, but they wouldn't be on the same page. He wouldn't be able to say to her, "Mama, I'm yours." And that's why he didn't drink it. That's what he's saying here in Tanya. When a Jew says, "I will not eat a non-kosher product," it's because a Jew is a Jew, and we don't want anything to come between the Jew in me and God. And the amazing thing, the miracle of Jewish survival, can be summed up in this one simple sentence. After 3,000 years, miserable years, since God asked us to keep kosher, since God asked us to be Jewish, 3,000 years later, we can still say to God, "We are yours. We're still yours." We're not undamaged. We're not perfect. But we are very much yours. So, the conversation between the person and his Yetzer Hara turns out to be an intelligent one, not embarrassing. Your Yetzer Hara should never be able to make a fool of you, where you're just sitting there saying, oh no, I don't wanna, or it's too disgusting, or not for me. I know there are Jews who do that, but that's them. Not for me. I'm from. So the conversation turns out to be an intelligent one. That might very well be the justification and the reason that the Alter Rebbe's philosophy is called Chabad. Chochma, Bina, Das. Knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. It's not because Chabad Hasidim are intellectuals. There's nothing good about being intellectual. The reason this is called Chabad is because this is, for the first time in history, an intelligent conversation with your Yetzer Hara. Your response to your Yetzer Hara should be intelligent. That's Chabad. It doesn't make you an intellectual. It just makes you intelligent. It doesn't allow the Yetzer Hara to make a fool of you. By the way, it's a little bit off the subject, but intellectuals are the most insecure people in the world. And that's as it should be. If you're intellectual, you never know anything for sure. Because that's the nature of intelligence. I can prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Democrats are right. And then tomorrow, I will prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Republicans are right. And they'll both make perfect sense. That's called an intellectual. So the intellectual is always insecure because nothing is for sure. The intelligence should be the tool by which you pursue the higher purpose. But a higher purpose is a passion, not an opinion. It's not negotiable. So how is it Chabad? You have two passions. There's the passion of the Jew in you, the godly soul, and then there's the passion of the human side of you, the human soul. They're both not reasonable. They're both fanatics. When you're hungry and you want that sandwich, it's fanatical. Your mouth starts to water. It's out of control. It's fanatical. So both souls are completely and totally opinionated. When you use your mind, you can make your animal soul, your human soul, more reasonable. That's the role of the intelligence. When your human soul becomes more reasonable, it hears the godly soul's passion. So when you do the mitzvah, you do it with a passion. But the intelligence has, facilitated. And that's where freedom of choice comes in. Freedom of choice is in the mind. Freedom of choice is an intelligent choice. But what are your choices? What are the options? If you have no passions, then there are no choices. You have one soul, like a tzaddik. What choices do you have? You're going to be good. But when you have two souls, and they're both fanatical, now you have to make a choice. But what you're choosing is a passion, not a philosophy. So the Chabad is simply a way of communicating with your animal soul, with your Yetzer Hara, so that it allows your godly passion to prevail. But without passion, no. Passionless is not Jewish.